Hürrem Sultan, or Roxelana, as Europeans called her, was a slave who became the only legal wife of an Ottoman sultan in 100 years. He wrote her poetry, gifted her own palace, never looked at another woman. It seemed like she had won. But she was the one who lived in constant fear. She was the one who plotted, removed people from her path, and couldn't sleep at night. Not because she was cruel, but because in the harem the Sultan's love was not a reward. It was a death sentence. Why, the only legal wife in 100 years? Did all the previous sultans simply not marry? Exactly. It was part of policy. If a sultan chose to marry, it meant forming family ties with someone else's clan. And where there's family, there are claims. Where there are claims, there are conspiracies. The Ottomans had seen this play out in other dynasties and drew their conclusion. No wives, only slaves from the harem, women with no family, no clan, no political connections. They bore heirs and brought nothing unwanted along with them. The system worked for nearly 100 years. Until Roxelana. But to understand why she was in danger, you need to understand where exactly she had ended up. The harem was not what films show. Not a room full of cushions where beautiful women lounged waiting for the sultan. It was a state institution with a rigid hierarchy, its own laws, and its own politics. A new slave who entered the harem started from nothing. She was called a Jariya, and she had nothing. No status, no money, no access to the sultan. First came years of training, languages, music, court etiquette, calligraphy. The harem didn't produce concubines. It produced educated women capable of holding a conversation with the most powerful man in the empire. Once a woman completed her training and gained access to the private chambers, she became a gadikli. If she spent a night with the sultan, she became an iqbal. Now she had her own room, a salary, and servants. If she bore a child, she became a kadin. That carried real weight. She was treated with respect. Her opinion mattered. And above all of them, the haseki, the favorite, a position unlike any other. This is where Roxelana rose to, and this is where her real problems began. As long as you were one of 100, you were safe. No one wasted energy on you. You threatened no one, and no one threatened you. But the moment the sultan singled you out, the entire harem began working against you. Because the harem wasn't simply women living under one roof. It was hundreds of people with opposing interests, each fighting for influence, resources, and survival. And the arrival of a new favorite meant one thing. Someone's influence had just diminished. The new favorite's greatest enemy was the Valide Sultan, the ruling sultan's mother. Her power rested on one principle. No woman should have permanent influence over her son. Only she, the mother, remained by his side always. Everyone else came and went. A favorite who stayed too long disrupted that balance. When Suleiman began to single out Roxelana, the previous favorite Mahidevran came to her and beat her, publicly, in front of witnesses. Roxelana then wrote Suleiman a letter about it. She deliberately let the marks show and described everything in detail. It was not a complaint. It was a political move. She already understood the rules of the game. The next step, bearing an heir. That seemed like the goal, the protection. But here, too, lay a trap. The Ottoman system had no order of seniority. There was no rule that the eldest son automatically became the next sultan. Any son could claim the throne. When a new ruler ascended, his brothers were killed. all of them, without exception. This was known as the Law of Fatih. Mehmed II enshrined it officially in the 15th century to prevent civil wars over succession. For a mother, it came down to this: your son either becomes sultan and kills his brothers, or he is killed himself. A harem with several mothers of potential heirs was not one big family. It was several hostile camps, each waiting for the others to die. Women smiled at each other at ceremonies and wished each other dead at night. Roxelana bore Suleiman 6 children. 5 survived. Each of her sons was simultaneously her hope and someone else's target. And even if you survived all of this, one final threat remained. The Sultan's death changed everything. If your son became the new Sultan, you became Valide Sultan, the pinnacle of power. Sometimes the Valide Sultan governed the empire in practice, while her son was young or away at war. This was known as the Sultanate of Women, and that is a story for another time. But if your son didn't win, you were sent to the Eski Sarai, the old palace. Officially, it was called an honorable retirement. In practice, exile. You lived there until the end of your life among women just like you, who had also once been young, beautiful, and needed, and who had also lost everything in a single day. One night with the Sultan could change your life. His death could take it all back. All women in the harem received the same training, but Suleiman fell in love with her specifically, and this defies precise explanation. His contemporaries were baffled. They said she had bewitched him with a potion. Venetian ambassadors wrote home in astonishment. His poems to her have survived, and in them you see not a sultan, but a man who simply misses a woman. But the main obstacle was not about feelings. While Suleiman's mother, the Valide Sultan Hafsa, was alive, marriage was impossible. To marry his son to a former slave would have been to humiliate the mother, the only person before whom Suleiman rose to his feet when she entered the room. Hafsa understood this, and while she lived, the balance held. Hafsa died in 1534, and shortly after, Suleiman granted Roxelana her freedom. Islamic law forbade marrying a slave, and then married her. The first legal marriage of an Ottoman sultan in 100 years. He took no other woman for the rest of her life. After her death, either. He outlived her by 8 years. She won, the only one who ever did. Everything that seems like luxury and power to us once came at a price. If you want to know what that price was, subscribe to the channel.